Hello YouTube. In this video we're going to build a hello world on steroids. It's going to be more than just a simple hello world. I'm going to have some user input and have some bundles and some exchange of information between a couple of different classes. So in getting started, I'm going to call this project number 1 because this is really the first tutorial past the install. And so you have to have the Android operating system. You have to have all your tools, your Eclipse and your Android installed before you start this lab. And this lab is very helpful, especially if you're taking the Android class that I'm teaching in the spring term. So this tutorial will help you with the first assignment, actually. So the project number 1, let's build a elaborate hello world. Shouldn't take you more than probably about an hour at the most. But let's see. So the first thing you need to do is open up Eclipse, and once you have Eclipse open, we're going to say File. Let me zoom in here. New. Well, we want to do a new project, so we're going to go and select File, New, and then go over to Project. And then in the Project window, maybe this is a little too big. No, there we go. Click on the Android project. We don't need a test project and we don't need a sample one. We just want to create an Android project. And click on the next button. And now we're going to have some information to fill in. I'm going to call this Lab 1, and if you keep with the same naming convention, this will make it easier for later on in this project when we start calling class files and stuff. But I'm going to call it Lab 1. And create it in a new project in a workspace where it's supposed to be. That's fine. Default workspace. That's fine as well. And I'm going to hit next. And then it's going to ask me for which version of the API of the new Android project for the SDK target do I want to build this for. I've been doing some experimentation over the last couple of days, and I've decided personally that I don't like 4.0.3 because it appears to be very buggy. And it seems like I've always had problems with it. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to select Android 4.0. It doesn't really matter which one you select, but I don't really recommend this newest platform release. It's a bit buggy, or it is on my computer. So Android 4.0 seems to be pretty stable. So I'm going to select that as my project type. It is still pretty current. Make sure to select the Android one and not the Google API. And then I select Next, and you're presented with some information here, and you want application name we already filled in. Package name, I'm going to actually kind of show you the convention now. So think of this sort of like an internet address backwards. So if I were going to type in, let's say, itu.edu, I'd go edu.itu, and then I would go, I'm going to call it Android. This is sort of like a folder inside of a folder, .lab1. So I'm going to use this as my package name. It doesn't really matter what you call your package, but this is essentially the directory path location for where all of your class files are going to be located. And then it's going to create an activity. An activity is going to be called Lab1 activity. I'm going to talk about activities in this video as well. So this is really just an orientation to the API as well. Minimum SDK, can keep it at 14. That's fine. We're not going to. This project is not going to. I'm not going to work with unit testing. So I'm going to leave that alone. And then I pressed on Finish. And now let me make this smaller so you can see what we have. And over here in the Package Explorer, I've got Lab 1 over here, and I've got this little red X thing here. Don't be concerned with this. It's essentially, you have to open something up first. So I just kind of opened up the source directory. I'm going to click on this labactivity.java file, and it's going to open up in the right-hand part of my screen here. And you're going to see in a few minutes these red things are going to go away. It might take a few more than that. What it needs to build is this automatic, there it goes, just went away for you. I did not touch anything on the keyboard. I just kind of sat here and waited for a few minutes, and the red stuff goes away. Because this resource here, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes, is created automatically, and it needs to pull it from the environment, from the project, and it needs a few minutes for some strange reason. I mean, you might not get that on your computer, but I'm running in a Windows XP emulator, so that's probably why I'm seeing that, because there's a, it's not the most speed demon computer here, so it's pretty slow. All right, so what I'd like to do then is kind of go through what we're looking at in terms of the lab. So obviously we have a source directory, and the source directory is going to be organized by the package name. Remember, I went in edu.itu.android.lab1. So imagine this was like a URL backwards. This is our directory structure. In here, although I called it lab1, this is really an activity class that's extending from activity. If you can see actually in this right-hand window, I double-clicked on this lab1 activity. And it's the activity class, or we're going to add another class in this particular project, but it is an activity class that's associated with lab1. We have different types of classes that we can put into this project. So in this particular case, what we're looking at here is your basic Java programming. We've got our package up here on the top. We've got our imports, the API activity, because that's what this class is using, and the OS bundle that's in there automatically. And then on here we have an onCreate method that's called per the activity, and this extends means that it's inherited. So lab1 activity extends activity. Activity would be the base class. Lab1 activity would be a derived class in terms of the hierarchy. It truly is object-oriented. And if you click through down here, you can kind of see, well, this is the onCreate method. So it just takes you further down in terms of the hierarchy of the class and the class structure. So I'm going to kind of make this small again and kind of go through the rest of it. You can kind of tell in terms of the generation, this is the r.java file that's created for us automatically. And if I were to double click on this r.java file, I get this thing, do not modify, written on the top of it. Not a good idea to modify this because it's done for you automatically. Even if you do modify it, the changes aren't going to take effect because every couple minutes the thing's going to start updating itself and you're going to lose your changes. But what is in this r.java file? Well, we got some stored information. In fact, we have a string in here, and the string is going to be for our Hello World app that you're going to see in a few minutes. We have some different attributes, layouts, and things like main as defined as the main layout. So I'm going to kind of minimize that a little bit and kind of keep going down further. And we can kind of see the Android jar file. And jar is a compressed format if you're not familiar with it. And this particular one is based upon the API format. So this is essentially our deployable kind of runtime environment and all the packages that are associated with that. So we don't really touch Gen or Android 4. You're not really going to touch assets either. You're not going to touch the bin directory probably at all either. So you will be touching resources, however. And in the resources, we have a few different items in here. We've got, when your application launches and you have an icon that shows up on the screen, well, there it is. So there's different resources for the icons for the launcher. These are just different ones for different MDPI, HD, different LP, different kind of versions of the same logo that are used for different application builds. The thing that you're going to play around a lot with is probably going to be in the layout, because this is your user interface. So if I double click on main.xml, it is truly an XML file, and it's going to open up in the right hand pane in a few minutes. Right over here. Here it is. And we've got two views to this XML file. We have one that we can actually make bigger if we wanted to by using the plus over here. Here it is. I can make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. When we run our application, it's actually going to look like this, because this is the name of the application. That's that icon I just showed you. And here's a little text string, a little text label that's going to show up for us. And we have folders, going to call them folders. They're sort of categories where we've got form widgets and text fields. And in this particular video, I'm going to use form widgets and text fields to build an application. And you know, it's actually kind of simple. You just drag something onto the canvas like that, and you want to get rid of it, you just click on it and you press delete. So these are items that are done programmatically. So we have another view to this XML file, and it's actually the text view to it. So if I click right here, right underneath where it says graphical layout, I can switch back and forth to the main.xml text layout versus the graphical layout. So it would be the graphical, there would be the text layout. And in this text layout, you can kind of see it's in a tagged format. For example, I have a linear layout, opening tag here, and then a closing tag. And it kind of looks like HTML, it's sort of, because we have this backslash or forward slash, I'd say, for the closing tag. But we're looking at a tagging system that tags data instead of content for display, which is kind of the basis of XML in general. You don't really need to know anything about XML, you know, for this type of development work. All you have to do is know the concept that we have an opening and a closing tag, and they're in matching sets. And we sort of have a nested hierarchy of elements that are appearing in here. But I'll go over that a little bit because we're going to edit one of these and create a new XML file as well. So down in the values, this is where we're going to have our strings defined in this particular application. I've got two strings that came up by default. One is going to be the hello string that prints out hello world lab activity number 1. And then and the name of the string is hello. And then this other one is the application name, which is called lab1. So that would be in our strings. And you just double click on the items and it appears up over here. And you can close the tabs if you want to clean it up. No, I don't want to save any changes to that XML file. And then down here I've got this other file. This one is used a lot, by the way, the Android Manifest.xml. And in the same way, you have this graphic kind of view, but then you also have this little tab down here where it says Android Manifest.xml, and you press on that, and this is what we're going to be editing usually. This has got information about the SDK version. It's got information about the application name, you know, the main activity, strings, and things of that nature. Intents, and I'm going to talk about a little bit about intents in a few minutes as well. But that's pretty much the orientation that's associated with what you get in the package Explorer. And you should have all of those items in your base package that you just created in terms of what you get. So let me take a look here, and these are kind of my cheat sheet instructions, but also for you as well. You can pause the video, read the screen if you want a little bit more detail. Yeah, that is if you can see the screen. Maybe you can see it better now. So we have already opened up Eclipse, and we have clicked on File, New. We created a new project. We called it Lab 1. We did 4.0. Here's the information here. If you weren't successful, it didn't open for you, or if you like looking at instructions more than hearing me give you the instructions or watching me do it, this is for you. We took a little tour of the application. We looked at the source directory, expanded it out, saw its hierarchy. We don't have hello world. Actually, this is going to be lab activity. Actually, I'm going to change this. Actually, lab activity. I think I called it Lab 1 activity, which is going to be essentially the main program, activity program. So it's auto-generated. It's a stub activity class. The name entered is the project creation wizard did it for us. It added some code. We're going to add some code to it later, but for right now, just think of it as an auto-generated file. And so we selected Android. There we go, 4.0. correct my cheat sheet as I'm doing this. And it's a version of the library that we have chosen for this particular project. The application is built using a version of Android.jar, and we looked at that as well. The the resource directory, aka external data files, is going to give us, and we saw that before, our information. 3 main types of resources that we're going to use, and the 3 main types are drawable, layout, and values. The drawable were those icons. You remember that? So it holds all the animation, all of the multimedia icons, anything that could possibly be of a GUI element. The layout, that's our user interface. That's where we saw main.xml in there. We also saw values as another component, and that's where we get the strings of XML was part of that as well. And then in the auto-gen, which was further up, if you notice, if you remember, we had that r.java, and we just remembered never ever edit r.java. It's created for you automatically, so don't worry about that. I didn't really show you assets, but assets is holding similar things as to resources. Main differences is you have access to classic file manipulation style. This is sort of the older non-GUI elements. And we looked at the Android manifest, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm probably going to upload this doc file, this project1.doc, and stick it, probably call it something else, but I'll stick it right underneath the video so you can download it and read through all this stuff on your own, because you certainly don't want me to read this to you. But as I see, I'm making typo corrections in it as I'm going through it, so maybe it is good that I'm going through it. Okay, so let's take a look here then at taking a look at, well, we did that. We did this already. We took a look at the XML interface of the main, and it kind of looks like a text editor. We looked at the linear layout. We had a text view on there as well, and we saw that string hello for hello world that was going to come out. Now, it's probably not a bad idea at this point to run the project just to make sure that we're working before we start making some modifications to it. So if you haven't done it already, you're going to need to select the window Avd Manager and then create a new AVD. So I'm just going to actually show you how to do that without reading you that stuff. So if I go into Window, in the old days these two were combined. This is the newest SDK that I've downloaded, newest tools with the newest Eclipse. And I've noticed it's now separated. Now we have a run. We have another actual kind of thing going on there too. But see, Evd Manager, I'm going to select it, and I actually already have one in here. But let me just delete it and recreate it. So I'm just going to go delete here. So to create an Evd Manager, it doesn't really matter how many times you create it. You create one each time you develop. In fact, it's not a bad idea to delete it and recreate it occasionally. Anyway, I guess it gets a little buggy. Give it a name. I'm going to call it AVD4. If I call it AVD4, then I can remember which API I'm using. Give it a target. So I just clicked on this right-hand arrow here. I'm going to use the API level 14 for this. And I'm going to press Create AVD on the bottom of the screen. And lo and behold, it is going to create an AVD for me. And then I can just close this window. It's already saved. I don't have to worry about it. And so when I run the application, I can click on Lab 1, right mouse click, go down to Run As. Go down further so you can see this at the bottom of the screen here, Run As. Or I can do it this way and go Run. So I can go Run or Run As. So if I go Run, I'm going to get the same pop-up window that shows up. And the pop-up window is going to say Android application, Android JUnit test, applet. No. Android application is what I want. And I'm going to press OK. And then I'm going to wait a few minutes because this is not what I'd call the fastest emulator, but I wanted to show you something about the emulator, which is of significant note. Because it does run, and it's kind of normal for it to run a little bit on the slow side, but while it's running in the background, you can actually flip back to the project and make sure you have your console window opened up, and you can see what's going on. So, as you can see, the AVD is running normally, and new emulator was started, was found, waiting for a home to be launched. And eventually we're going to see installing Lab 1, and we're going to see Lab 1 starting, and we're going to see intents and services and things going on depending upon what I have in the project. And in this particular case, it's just not going to load very much at all. So this should load pretty quickly. And you'll notice as it's moving in the background here, it says Android on it. You know, it looks pretty cool. It will actually start running a little bit faster the more times you load it, believe it or not, because it does cache, it does save some state information. But one important thing to remember, the reason why I'm showing this to you is if it does fail consistently or keeps failing on you, there's probably a problem with your source code, and you can probably see the problem in this little window because it'll show up in red instead of in black. So in the future, when I start loading it, I think I'll pause the video at the load so you don't have to sit here and wait as long as I have to wait. But in this particular case, I sort of want this to load and have you experience how long it actually does take. Because a lot of people think it's broken. They click the window, they shut it, and they say, hey, the program doesn't run. Well, you just didn't give it enough time. So it does take patience. So as this is loading, it'll eventually come up, and it's supposed to actually start your app for you automatically. And if your app doesn't start for you automatically, don't be concerned. It's the timing of the emulator. It's the emulator timing out. It's how much memory you might have available. There's a lot of different factors that are associated with how fast that's going to run. I'm getting ready to pause the video for you. Yeah, let me pause the video for you. I'll come back in a few minutes when this emulator loads up. Okay, I'm back, and so is the emulator. It has loaded, so it says make yourself at home, yada yada. And if I take a look at the status that's in this window here, I can sort of see, here it is, installing lab1.apk, and that's the compressed package. In fact, towards the end of the video, I'll show you how to export. I'll show you the notes on that. And so it was successful, starting the activity, lab 1 on the emulator, successful. But you might notice that lab 1's not really running on the emulator. So instead, I'm going to press OK on the emulator. Make this a little bigger so you can see it. Press OK. Oh, there we go. Not very responsive. And then I'm going to get, I do have a lot of stuff running on this computer though, to give it credit. I get the main screen, and then I'm going to press this little guy down here, kind of give me my list of applications. And maybe I'll make it a little smaller. It's just kind of, unfortunately, launcher has stopped. Okay, well, that's one of those odd errors that you're going to get. So I pressed OK. Hello. Oh, there we go. It's just running a bit slow. So I'm going to press the launcher here again and see if it loads this time. And what I've got going on here, little loader. And we'll just be happy when the thing actually loads. So give it a few minutes. Should hopefully be loading soon. Well, let me pause the video until the loader gets done. It shouldn't take too much long. It doesn't normally take this much time. Alright, let me pause the video. This will eventually come back. It just needs to load for another 5 minutes. And as soon as I pause the video, it comes back. So here we are. Probably should have just waited. Alright, so I'm going to press OK. And little instructions there. The first time you run the emulator, it does kind of run the slow side. But anyway, I see lab 1 here, so I'm going to press on lab 1. I just want to make sure it works. And lo and behold, it works. So voila, we have lab 1 working. So I'm going to go ahead and close this right now. So it won't be until a while before we have to go through that ordeal again. Because there's another spot we want to test it like halfway in the middle of it. But let's go ahead and make this more exciting. And what we're going to do, so we've run the hello world on the emulator. It works. Now, I'll leave this here for you for a reading assignment. And I'll upload this to the YouTube site right underneath the video. And you can read through the different types of things. We have activities, services, content providers, broadcast receivers. There's 4 different types of component classes to an Android application. We're going to work with activities, and we're going to make another activity class that's going to work with another interface that we're going to use to have someone, type their name in so that they can see hello, their name on the screen. So the class is going to get the user's name, essentially. And so we're going to create a user interface by creating a new XML file. So the first step we're going to do is actually create the file. So we're going to go to select the menu, File, New, Android XML file. And most likely it's not going to exist, so we're going to have to select the other category. But let me just show you how this works. So I'm going to go File, New, but this time I want to choose XML file, but I don't see XML file on my list. You're probably not going to see it either if you have a newer version of Eclipse. So I'm going to go down here to the Other, and lo and behold, I have XML files up here. And I see Android XML file right here. And that's what I want. I don't want to do like the layout or the values. I just do a generic XML file. And then press Next. And then it's going to ask you, what is it going to ask you for? The file name. We'll get the project. And the file name, let me see what my instructions are going to have me name it. We're going to name it name getter. In fact, I can just cut and paste here. It's going to be called name getter because the interface is essentially getting the name from the user. So we're going to call it name getter. And we're going to use the default linear layout. So according to the instructions, if you want to repeat this at a later time, you're going to select the layout as the resource type. So resource type up here is layout. Project is lab 1. And the name of the file is name getter. And then you're going to select linear layout here, linear layout in the drop-down box, which is the default actually. And then we're going to press finish. There's different types of layouts that exist. And you can see what I just did was that by default you're presented with the graphical layout. When I pressed on namegetter.xml, I saw the text show up. And what we see is the opening tag for linear layout and the closing tag for linear layout. And then we see a bunch of default things, the height, the width, the orientation, whether it's vertical or horizontal. We're going to leave it on vertical, but I believe we're going to fill the parent instead of having it open. So we opened it up in the editor, and we're going to change some attributes here, and we're going to change the width and the height to fill parent. So we want to make sure we also include the vertical instead of horizontal, but I think it's set on vertical automatically. So take this, instead of match parent, we're going to change it to fill parent. It basically fills up the screen instead of overlaying it. So we got fill parent, leave the quotes, and all the tags are actually, follows XML standards and XHTML standards where every one of the property values is in quotation marks. So you just have to get familiar with and expect the quotation mark, the parentheses to be everywhere. Quotation marks are parentheses, I guess. So you can leave the spaces in here, doesn't really matter, they were in there already. The rest of this looks good. So fill parent. So I'm going to go back to the graphical layout, click on that, because we're going to add some stuff, I believe, to the screen. So we've changed the width, we've changed the height to fill parent. Now we're going to leave the attribute to orientation to the vertical. Okay, that's good. Now we switch back to the graphical view. And so we're going to add 3 elements. We're going to add 3 elements that all are going to reside in the form widgets and the text fields. I can sort of remember what this is already. So we're going to put a label. Let's see what I'm going to want here. Text view, a text field, and a button. So the order matters. In fact, we can make this a little bigger if we want. There we go. So in our palette over here, I don't think we can make this any better. Maybe we can, actually. I can go down like this a little bit. There we go. That's better. Okay, so here's our big interface that we're building. And we're going to want to put a text view to view text. And it's going to be like a, something that says, here, enter your name. We're going to want to put in a text field. So these are in form widgets. If you click on the folder, just to open and shut, okay. click on, here we go, I just clicked on another folder and it opened. Let's just put a plain text underneath it. There's different types of text boxes that you could possibly put in. There's like first name, last name, a password, you know, it's going to put all the dots next to it. I just put a plain one in there. You can modify this a little bit and put whichever ones you like in there. I'm going to go back to form widgets. I'm going to find a button. There's a button up there. Yeah, well, that's good. The button right here looks good. Put a little button on here. Well, looks good. So we got text view, an input box, and we can kind of sort of see when we hover the mouse over, we kind of got little changes going on. And if I go back to the name getter.xml, I see the code has been filled in now. And the code that's been filled in matches the items, and this is the order of the items. So this is very kind of a basic type of way of doing it. You can drag the items around and it would switch the order in here as well. But if you add them, you know, in the correct order, you don't have to do very much manipulation to it. So you'll notice that each one of the GUI elements that I put in here has an ID. And so Android :ID is going to look like this right here. And the part that we're interested in is the second part where it says text view 1, and then I have edit text 1, and then there's a button 1, which is, you know, pretty standard. And then we have text that shows up on the buttons as well. And this is, you know, these are options that you can change. So in terms of what we're going to do, we're going to click and drag on, we got that. I just want to make sure I put everything on here I'm supposed to. Okay, switch back to the elements, and so change for the text view, that one's going to be the button that's going to say enter your name. So up here for text view on the text here, I'm going to say, that's just the text that's going to show up on the text view on the screen. I'm going to say enter your name. That looks good. And then for the edit text, that's where we're just going to have the user enter their name. And then for the button, we're going to want to put something on the button. Instead of the button saying button, we can put something like OK, you know, press OK. So the concept is there's going to be a label shown to the user that says enter your name. There's going to be a box underneath it so that the user can enter their name. And there's going to be a button that says OK. It's going to take the name and send it to the next screen. We're going to use a hint, however, on edit text. So there's an option to put in what's called a hint. And here it says this text field does not specify an input type or a hint. Well, that's good. We're going to put a hint in. So I'm going to put it in right here. It doesn't really matter what order this stuff shows up in, but I'm going to type in Android hint equals. I'm not going to use and these are saved resource strings. I'm just going to manually type one in. I'm going to say enter your name, please. And so when the user hovers their mouse over the, and I don't wonder if our hint's actually going to work in the emulator, but theoretically when the user hovers the mouse over the input field, it should pop up a little hint box that says enter your name, please. So we'll see if that actually works. Go back to my cheat sheet here. Enter your name on Android hints. We put the label on the button. Okay, good. So now we're getting ready to create the class. So one of the things you want to make sure that you do is save it. And the easiest way to save something is just to close it, because you want to get rid of it anyway, because you're going to have something new up here in a few minutes. So you just press on the close, and it says name getter has been modified. Do you want to save changes? And say yes. And then it closes it up, saves it, puts it back. So the next step is to create a new class. And the new class, we're going to want to put it right here in the same package as the existing class. And let me see what we're going to call the class. I'm going to use the same names as this example here. We're going to call the class getName. That sounds pretty good. So we're going to go File, New Class, and we're going to say getName, and we're going to use the same thing as we used before in terms of the project properties. So I'm going to go File, New, and here's the interesting thing. So I can create a new package, a new interface, a new class. This is the one I want right here. So I'm going to say Class. And we're going to put it in lab 1 source. And the package, if you start typing something like that, edu dot, and all of a sudden you say, oh, look at that, that's the package I want. I'm going to put it right there, which is the full package. That type name is empty. Yeah, I know, I haven't gotten there yet. So this thing is a little irritating. So this is the package I'm going to put it in. And what was I going to call it? Get name. Get name. Let's see. It's discouraged by convention. You want to start with an uppercase. All right. So get name. You can kind of see how you can get like this little help that shows that type name is discouraged because it's the lower type. So by convention, Java names usually start with an upper letter. So if I changed it, then well, irritating message goes away. So you can program by irritating messages if you want. And just press finished. And when I do that, lo and behold, what do I get? I get over here, I get name. You just saw a few minutes ago, it popped up. We can kind of use this, I'm going to open up both of them so we can kind of sort of use it as an example. We're going to want to, we have package in here and we have get name, but we're not extending anything. So in order to make this sort of work with this first lab 1 class, we need to also extend activity and we need to implement. So according to the directions that I've put together, and this is what our new class looks like. That's great. Well, we want to extend activity and implement Android view on Onclicklistener because we have a button that's going to be on this interface that on a click listener activity, we want to capture that event and send some information over and continue working with it. So here's what you can do, and this is why I'm going to kind of cut and paste and put this underneath. I'm going to actually just do this and then talk about it in a few minutes. Copy. Or I guess I could do it manually, but it's so much easier to cut and paste. So I'll make sure that this file is available for you. Make sure you're in to get name and go ahead and paste that code in there. And let's see, what kind of messages we're going to get from pasting. It doesn't match the expected edu. Oh, that's why. This is a capital L. So I used a small L on my, oh no, there's a capital L up here. It's fine. Let's see. It does not match the expected package. Move, change package declaration. I had done that already. Here we go. Oh, maybe oh no, I had Android capitalized, I guess, I don't know. Anyway, long story short, you just saw how to troubleshoot an error message by seeing a red. So in Eclipse, you'll see little red stuff. It shows up. You click on it, it gives you some suggestions, and usually 1 or 2 of the options are actually working. So what did I do? I just, I put this in here so I didn't have to type extends activity, implements Android.view, Onclicklistener. And then if I had typed it in automatically, one of those little pop-up boxes would have come in and said, do you want to implement the required methods? And if I said yes, then it would have given me this blank on click. And you can kind of see as I move my mouse over, these little windows are popping up. Somehow I actually kind of find them irritating, but some people like them because it gives you information about what it is you're looking at. This is just auto-generated method that would have been auto-generated if I had auto-generated it. It's the stub, so everything appears to be in order here. And now we're going to need to start filling this in. So what we've done is just created, let me get rid of this little clipboard thing. So we modified to extend activity and implement Onclicklistener. And so the finished class looked like this. Now we're going to add a data member of the type Android widget edit text. And let me do this manually so you can kind of see what would happen. So just like in regular old Java, we have data members and member functions, and this is a member function. And if we want to do a data member, we could just put it right above, let's say. So I'm going to put it right here, and I'm going to paste that line of code in there. And lo and behold, I don't get any error messages or anything. If I wanted to, I could say leave out this here, and say edit text name. It's kind of like string name as a data type. And then I would have gotten this little squiggly line underneath it. And if I had put my mouse over the squiggly line, it would have given me the first option. And usually it's the first or second option is going to be the one you're going to pick. And the first option just says, well, import edit text. So I just selected OK. So now I have Android widget edit text up here on as in the import line instead of preferencing it here. Either way you want to do it, it's fine. This is a lot less typing, but I'm only going to have one or two data members. So I could have just, instead of importing the whole class, I could have just pasted that in. But we'll just kind of leave it at that. And it kind of gives you an example of how those little pop-up windows work. And how it is useful to a certain extent. So we added the data member. The data member, this particular data member is going to be a name, and it's of the same data type as the widget that we're using on the form, and the form is an edit text. So the edit text box that we put on the form, and we put enter your name here as a little hint as you put your mouse over it. That edit box is going to take a name from the user. The name from the user is going to be copied to this variable. This is going to be referencing it, I should say. So this will hold a reference to the text, which the user is going to enter in. They're going to enter their name. The same one that's added to name underscore getter.html layout, which is kind of like what I just explained. Okay, so add a method to the following signature, with the following signature, public void onCreate bundle saved instant state. OnCreate, I believe we already have an onCreate. And no, we don't. That was an onClick. So I'm going to create an onCreate, and this is just going to be a template, not a template, but actually you can call it a template. I'm going to put it underneath. I'll put it on top. Put it on top because we're going to fill this in first. So I'm going to paste it in there. So I've got an onCreate bundle, and I got, oh look, got another squiggly line. And so you got two options. You can go over here and say bundle cannot be resolved as a type, or you can go under here. And how am I going to fix it? Well, it is a type, so I'm going to import bundle. So now I fixed it by importing it because it was first time I used bundle, and it's a data type. And first time I used it, and it wasn't recognized. So that's how you resolve those types of errors. So this particular method is going to be called when the activity starts and is initialized for local and data members. Everything will be done for initialization. So inside of the method, we're going to perform the following. We're going to make a call to super onCreate. So this is an inheritance thing. As super comes back and calls the constructor of the inherited class, we're implementing an interface Onclicklistener. We're inheriting from activity. So by default, the default activity constructor is going to run on the onCreate, and it's going to save the instant state, which basically is going to capture the event. You can go online and read all about the concept of inheritance and pretty much get most of that. So this should always be done, and it needs to be a necessary part of the parent class initialization. Also make a call to this convert. In fact, here's the text here. I'm just going to copy it. So we're by default, you're going to find this is going to be pretty standard in most of the apps that you create. You're going to essentially call super, so you can get the super constructor from activity, and then you're going to get this content view, and you're going to get name vent. You're going to get the XML file, which is named getter, and you're going to take that information and load it into resources that you're going to use inside of the class. This is so that you can modify those GUI elements programmatically inside of the class code. Long story short. So when you created an XML file earlier, Android Eclipse plugin automatically added those static ones to the R layout class into the R Java. So, back when, remember when I was talking about that r.java file that gets created for you automatically. So those elements that you stuck in the XML file already got created in the r.java, so you can just pull them right out of it. So the next line is that we're going to make a call to this .findView by ID to find the elements and set the text ID member variable equal to that particular value. And so to do that, we can go up here, and this is the line of code here that we're interested in getting here. And if we do this, then this is the name up here. It was an edit text name. And the name is now going to be equal to, and this is what's referred to as casting. So we're casting this object type, and this object type is from a find view by ID. Remember those IDs I pointed out? We had one that was called edit text 1. We have button 1, and we have, I think, view something, view text 1. Those are essentially the IDs that are associated. You can change the IDs if you want. Some people get through, but the hard problem with that is it's hard to remember what you changed them to. If you leave them on the defaults, then you can kind of figure it out. So what we're doing in this particular line is within the class element, we're getting the GUI element from the r.id resource that's created automatically for us from the XML file. Finding the ID, and copying the object into a local object so we can work with it. So we can go ahead and take it and use it in terms of our dynamic behavior that we're going to create. So we need to do one for the button as well. So this one was for the text. So it serves the purpose of getting the text from the edit box. So when you type your name into the edit box, it's going to show up in edit text 1. So we're going to find it by the ID, copy it to this local element. So then we're going to make a call to this line for the button ID to set the local widget button reference equal to the return button. So let me show you another little trick here. This is the finished code. If I just go like this up here, let's say for example, and just copy it because I didn't make the button element. I didn't make the button data member yet. But if I go like this and kind of just put this underneath here, let's say I was typing it. I was going to say, I want to call it button, and let's typecast it to button, and it's going to be for button number 1. But then I didn't do this step up here. I can put my mouse over again. It says create local variable button. I have to say OK. You can go button button, or if I wanted to do it that way, and then I have to go here import button widget. Import button widget. So now I have button up here. Or if I wanted to be more standard, I could come up here and say button button. Oops, I think I called it with a lower button. Button button. And then take this off here. And now this code will work just fine. So button is a button type. So that you have a couple different options. I sort of like, this is one of the reasons why I actually like Eclipse, is because it kind of helps you figure out what it is you need to do sometimes. So most you have to sort of have half of a clue why you're doing it, but otherwise you do the wrong things. So we're going to take a look at this code up here, and I believe we've built something very similar to this. Not exactly, because ours are up in the imports. But yes, this looks pretty good so far. So now we're going to make a call to button to set the Onclicklistener. So on the onCreate, this was on the onClick up here. Is what we're going to do next. Right now we were in onCreate. Oops, no, we're going to put it in onCreate. Excuse me. The button should be placed with the local button reference that you just received. So here we go. I'm going to cut and paste this and stick it underneath the button reference. And it's kind of common to actually put some spaces in here so you can kind of separate out the logic a little bit. So when you go back in to troubleshoot it, you can figure out where are these things and why did I put that here. So I've got the two buttons, excuse me, I got the button, I've got the edit text here. And now I have put the listener to listen on the button, which is appropriate because you want to put the button listener right next to the button so you can find it and kind of make sure you did it. And the button listener is on this, which is going to be this button. So if you're not familiar with Super and this, go back through and look at my Java lectures. I go through both of those two concepts. This is the Android application development. It's not really programming in Java. Although I will be covering some object-oriented stuff very soon. But you can get through this tutorial at this point knowing that this is referring to this current object, this current class, and Super goes up the hierarchy. It goes up to the parent class from the child. So fill in the onClick method stub, and when we fill in the onClick method stub, we're going to create an intent. So we're going to retrieve the user entered text from the text field, keep it in a local string variable, and then use an intent and a bundle together to send from one class to another class. This is how we're going to communicate between the classes, because we actually have two different classes. We have the original Lab1 activity class, and then now we have the getName class. The getName class is going to get the information, put it into a string, and then send it to the other class. So we're going to create an Android content.intent object using this line of code here. I believe I have it cut and pasted down here. I do. So I'll just wait. I'll kind of go through it and then I'll just cut and paste the code in a few minutes. We're going to use the intent object to start the Lab1 activity, greeting activity, and pass it the information. I'm going to discuss intents a little bit further in the next lecture, actually. So I'll save that for right now. Essentially, they're used to interact with different application components, if you remember that. So we're using input put extra, and this is sort of like a hash map. So we've got a key and a value. So if we say that the name, and we call it a name or uname or something, give the key a name, and the value is going to be the information that's coming from the GUI element. So it's kind of like a hash map, and we ask for the key and we get the value kind of thing when we use it. So we make a call to intent, put extra key value, where the intent should be placed with the intent object that we create. I'm going to create an intent object in a few minutes. The key is going to be placed with the string that the user's it's going to be able to access the user's name, and the value is going to be what's in that text edit. So we have to do a toString on a get text from the text edit object to bring that information into the project. So the finished code after these steps are going to look like this here, and I'm just going to take and cut these two here. This is on the onClick, so I'm going to put it in the onClick method, which is right here. And I can get rid of this auto message now because we don't need any more auto stuff going on. And I'm going to say paste. So now I have, and lo and behold, I have a squiggly red underline saying I've got a problem. When I have multiple markers at this line, intent cannot be resolved as a type. Okay, those don't actually give me as much help as this does when it says import intent. So I'm going to import the intent. Lines go away, and up here, I now have a new import on content intent up here. This is the new line that was added for me automatically. So let me go back here and see. Looks pretty good. So now make a call to this .activity start intent. So on the onClick, we're going to add, it looks like the same method, we're going to add another call underneath it, and it's going to be this line here to start the activity. So I'm going to go back into this onClick and paste this line in here. Hello. So on the onClick, I'm going to create a new intent. The intent, just think of it more like a sort of like a socket, but it isn't. Communication protocol. And the intent is going to be on lab1activity.class, which is this activity class that I'm editing. No, it's this one here. It's the one I'm going to communicate to. Forgive me. So the getName is going to communicate with the lab1 activity class through this intent. So it's kind of, think of it more, I was trying to get away from that stuff. Think of it more like a binding. I'm going to bind this class with that bind, or creating a socket or something. It's a similar concept. Yeah, it's called an intent. So my intent.putExtra is going to send, this is the key value I was talking about. Here's the key. The key is going to be called uname, and the value is name.getText.toString from name, and name is the object that we have up here that's coming from the resource edit text1, which is that little name field that we have on there. This is saying that this object, start activity in my intent, start the activity for the activity listener. So we have an Onclicked listener and we have an activity because we're extending activity. Activity gives us intents, and it gives us a bunch of other types of tools that we're going to use to communicate between objects. So I'll definitely go over more with intents in a future lecture as well. So this command will initiate the switch to the Lab1 activity greeting activity. So now we're going to reconfigure the Lab1 application so that it doesn't call the main.xml. Instead, it's going to call our new XML file. So we have to edit the manifest. So I'm going to go back to the Android project here. And I'm going to go down to the Android manifest here. And actually, this is a good thing to do. I'm going to click and close this and save it. Because I haven't saved it yet. So I'm going to save. I'm going to close this one too, just to get it out of the way. I'm going to double click on the Android manifest. And lo and behold, I've got an application name right here. And I can do this without the notes. This application matches this class. So the main class, before we added getName, we had lab1.activity. Lab1 activity, which is what this one. And there's a dot right before it on the lab1 activity. So I'm just going to change this name here. And I'm going to change it to the other class, getName, because we want the getName class to show up first. So nothing's going to show yet, but eventually getName is going to call lab1 activity. But getName is going to be the first one. So we changed this Android name to getName. And I have to also make sure that it's aware of the lab1 activity. So this is there's two activities that are going on here. Here's this one activity. You can kind of see the activity from the opening and closing activity tag. And the activity tag is for the application, and the application launcher is going to launch this activity, and this activity is going to be launched first as main from the Android intent action main. And we're going to put a little placeholder down here just so we don't forget to do it coming up. Let me just make sure. I'm not sure where I have it actually in my notes, but we need to add it so that the manifest is aware of the other class, because eventually we're going to call it. So we're going to open up, here we open up the activity tag, first activity tag, and we change, replace it with getName. Look at the package attribute for the manifest, and here it is here. I did put it up here, very good. I'm going to cut and paste this other activity. We're going to add in the activity for the running of the other one, the other class, and make sure you put it so you have an opening and a closing. Here we have an opening and a closing activity bracket, and I'm going to paste this here, and you're going to see in a few minutes another opening and a closing. Although I kind of put them all on the same line, that's fine. And this one is the activity 1, lab 1 activity. Did I spell that right? I believe I did. Let me just make sure real quick here. Activity, perfect. Okay, so now I have an opening and closing, and I'll put some space around that so I can, see it the next time I'm looking at it. And this is just because in the future, when we're going to load it, we need to have the activity registered, otherwise it's not going to find it. It's going to cause an error message. So it declares the Android device. It tells this declares to the Android device that the application has an activity component named lab. Actually, lab 1 activity. And if you don't add this tag, it won't be able to launch the activity in the future. So we're kind of finished with it, and I cut and pasted and I put the finished file here just in case, just in case I'm making some typos. At this point, we can run the application and it should start up, and it should have us put the name in, but it's not going to use the name for anything. And you should be able to enter the name and then hit the button, and then after the old lab 1 greeting, lab 1 activity, activity greeting should appear, but nothing is going to happen. So let's go ahead and test it, actually. And then, because this is not a bad spot here, let me just save this as well. Not a bad time to make sure we're still working properly. So the lab 1 manifest has been modified, so I'm going to change it, and I say yes. So I saved the changes. Now I'm going to run it in the emulator. So I'm just going to go down here, and I'll do it this way because I ran the run last time. So I'm running it here, and so the console screen should show up. Here it is. And let me make this a little smaller so I can see it. And now I should have an emulator running momentarily. starting activity. Let's see, I'm going to try it one more time. Okay, it's probably gonna show up momentarily. I'll pause the video until the emulator is fully loaded. So stand by. Actually, you don't have to stand by. You know, the video is going to resume when the emulator is loaded. And I think I just need to have this sit here for a few minutes and it will actually load. So I will pause the video momentarily. As you can see, my emulator did start, but it is still going. So I will pause the video one more time. When it actually gets fully loaded, I will resume. Okay, so the emulator has loaded, and now it's slightly different because this isn't the first time I've loaded it after I created it. So on the bottom here, you've got to kind of unlock it before the application's going to run. And let's see, here we go. You have to take this little lock thing and slide it over to the right. And when you do that, the emulator will unlock. And I'm hoping that the application is just going to load automatically this time. It says it's installing Lab 1. I opened up the console screen here. So it appears that Lab 1 should be running. No, it's not. So I'm going to click on the launcher on the bottom of the screen. This little I just clicked on this little round circle thing. And then wait for this launcher to load up. I can tell you though, the iPhone emulator runs a lot better than this, which is different. The iPhone development is harder to learn, I believe, yet the emulator runs faster. Android is all in Java, so it's pretty easy, but the emulator runs slow. So I guess both development environments have their pros and cons. I'm just going to let this run because the last time I paused the video, it just came up automatically. So let's see. As soon as I give up and pause the video, the emulator will show correctly. Alright, let's do it. I'm going to pause the video and resume when it's loaded. And just as I expected, it loaded pretty fast after that. Alright, so I'm going to go back to my emulator here, and I'm going to click on Lab 1. And hopefully I'm not going to get any errors. Here we go, Lab 1. Oh, Lab 1 activity. Let's see. Starting activity. I'm going to run it one more time because it shouldn't. It should be loading our, unless I didn't save it, which I'm pretty sure I saved it. I believe that's the old one. It didn't actually load. So let me pause the video one more time, and I'm going to load the emulator one more time so we can get the right activity to show up. Okay, what I actually just did was I stopped the emulator before I paused the video, and I pretty much just started it over again. Sometimes that does happen, and I noticed that it happened because it showed our old application instead of the one that we had just changed, and sometimes it just doesn't install correctly. So if I look at my console window down here, I can see this time it does say successful. In the previous attempt, it did not actually install successfully. It came out with an error for some strange reason. Probably is memory related, but who knows. But in any case, when that happens, just close the emulator, open it back up again, and hopefully you'll end up with the right application at least installed, or the right version. And it makes it hard for testing, especially when you think you're testing a changed program, when it's really the old program that was left in the emulator from the last time you ran it. And if that happens a lot to you, I would recommend deleting the AVD and recreating it. So as you can see now, our get name interface, this is the one we created. We put this text label up here. We put the edit field here, and we put the button here. So if I were to type, and hopefully it does work, there we go, it does work. If I type in a type my name and press OK, it will take me to Lab 1 activity. This is the first screen. So this is our old app that we created, the original app. But it's not saying hello Barbara or anything yet because we haven't built that out. We haven't made the intent work yet. But rather right now it's just bringing up the old app. So if I press the back button or the go back, I can kind of modify a little bit. Put Mary in there next, and I know it's not really going to do anything, but you should test it to make sure that when you press the OK button, it's going to load the first activity. So now I'm going to close my emulator, which I worked so hard to load, and move on with the instructions. So at this point, we test the application. It worked, so that's good. So the Lab 1 activity greeting activity appeared, but it was the original. It wasn't the one that we changed. So now we have to greet the user. So now we're going to give a name that's going to be retrieved from the edit box and update the Lab 1 activity. Let me edit this for you as I'm looking at it. My Lab 1 activity, and then the activity is going to print out the name that the user enters in the onCreate method of lab1.java. So we're going to go back up to it looks like Lab 1 activity. So I'm going to double click on that and put it over here. Because when this loads, it needs to take the information that's being sent to it from the intent, and use it to populate its screen. So we're going to have to look in main.xml for the item, and this is the item here. Actually, it's the text view. So we don't need this output screen right now, so I'm going to lower it down. So I double-clicked on main.xml, and what I'm trying to find is on this screen, on this layout here that we've got. I just pressed the graphical layout button here. This is what I'm interested in finding out, because this is going to need to change. So I'm going to go back here and say, it's the second item, it's the text view. So I'm going to add an ID for the text field. And I think I'll stick it right here, actually. I'm going to say Android ID. And here's the other interesting thing. So as you're typing along, you'll get, in fact, I could have used this for the hint, perhaps. You'll get the little pop-up box. Some people like it, some people find it irritating. I guess I'm kind of in between on it. It never seems to work when I want to use it. So I'll just type in I. Here we go. Here it is, ID right here. So, what is the ID going to be equal to? Well, I could cheat and go back, let's say, to name getter and say, well, I don't know what the format is. I'll just go like this here. And go copy. I want to call it something unique, though, because I want to be able to get at it. And let's go like this. Paste. Let's call it Textview 2. Make it unique. So lo and behold, now I have an ID for Textview 2, which is different. And because I'm going to need to basically populate this. So I'm going to do something very similar. In fact, let me save this now. Very similar to what I did in the first step in terms of getting the name from the edit field. Instead, now we're just going to put it on the edit field. So I'm going to close this one too. I didn't change that one. So let me go back to my directions. And the directions are going to say let's see, make a call to the bundles get string key. Okay, to get it. We're going to use the information that we created. So we're going to replace the key string used by the user intended from the hash map. So on the create method, we've got already these two items, I believe. Yes, we do. So in our lab1 activity.java, we have our first, and these are two kind of just standard, these are just two standard lines you're going to see in most. This is what we actually added. So now we're going to create a bundle object to input, my input, get the extras. So this is going to go, I'm going to copy it. This This is going to go in the lab 1 activity. So after the part method looks like this, which we create the bundle. So I'm going to put a space in here. I'm just going to paste it in here so I don't have any typing errors. And if I put this over here, it says the value of the local variable my input is not used. Yes, I know that. Don't correct this because we're gonna put it to use in the next couple steps. So we created the bundle. Okay, what is a bundle? Bundles are kind of like packages, packets. It's containing information. So we're getting it from the intent, and we're going to take bundle, and we're going to call it my input, and we're going to take that, and it's going to hold the information that we're going to parse out to use from the first screen to send to the second screen. So we're going to set a reference to the text view. In fact, I did this first actually. So we already edited main.xml. We added this reference. And if you made a mistake, if yours is not working, you can cut and paste this one. I don't really need to because I already changed it. So you can cut and paste that and put it in. Now we're going to set the text view object to say hello name, and the name should be replaced by what the user enters in, and it's going to be retrieved from the bundle object. So we have these lines of code already. I'm just going to cut and paste this whole piece here and stick it in so I don't have to type it. You can do the same thing and this should work for you. I guess I could have just built the entire project for you. But then you wouldn't have the experience of actually knowing how to troubleshoot it. What is you're actually doing. So you can see I kind of got some squiggly lines here, and if I put my mouse over, it's going to complain because I haven't imported text view. So I'm going to import text view. And then voila, I have text view up here, text view, and I have bundle up here. I think bundle was there automatically. So what have I done? So I've created, just like it created in the other one, a name string, and there was an edit text entry that was used to kind of not only get the information from the first edit text box that we put our name in, but store it in a string and then send it through the intent and bundle it up and send it to the intent, which is essentially what we're doing. Now we're going to take it from the intent, and we're going to, so we have the text view t is equal to new text view this, which is just an object that we're creating here in the class to represent the text view. And then the text view, we're going to find the text view 2, which is the one that we put in the XML file, in main.xml. We put the label ID there for text view 2. And then we're going to say, and t is the name of our object here, of our text view object, t.setText, hello plus the input string, uname. So the input string is from the bundle, and the bundle came from the intent, and the bundle included in there was the key value hash map of uname with the content that we're going to get from the resource of the edit text. So we're taking that and we're transferring it essentially from the first class to the second class via the bundle and using an intent to make that happen. So, and it might help to do a little bit of reading, I believe, on the concept of intent and bundles to sort of understand the concept. So now we're done to the point where we can export, and I'll talk about exporting the applications in a few minutes. But let's go ahead and come back to here, and I'm going to save it. And I don't see anything. No red marks or anything. So now let's run it. So I might have to pause the video again while it's loading, so you don't have to sit here and watch it. But let's make this screen big here so I can kind of see what's going on. That's good. And right mouse click, I'm going to do a run, and I'm going to do application. So, and hopefully it's going to launch the emulator. So. Yep, there it is. So this is, it may not take too long actually. Seems to be loading kind of quickly this time. So either my video has failed or, I don't know. Nope, still recording, it's good. So let's see. Because this emulator might be challenged, I believe, by the iShowU software that I'm using as well that's recording this video. But we'll see. Alright, for the sake of not boring you, I will pause the video and come back when the emulator is completely loaded, which would take probably about 2 or 3 more minutes. Okay, the emulator has loaded, and I'm sitting here. The application hasn't started yet, but we've got the emulator up. It says it's installing the application. Well, we know what it looked like last time, so if it doesn't look the same, or if it looks the same, we know it hasn't refreshed. So I'm going to unlock it. There we go. I don't see any success coming back, though, from the installing here, so let's see. We just have to try it again, or wait a few minutes. It does appear to be doing something outside of loading. I'll just, oh, there we go. I'll just give it a few more minutes. So, might be, see, it's supposed to say installing, and then it goes, oh, here it goes, successful. Okay, good. We just saw it in live a few minutes ago. It didn't say successful. So now I can be relatively rest assured that I'm getting the most current run of this build. So one of the things that you'll get tripped up with is you're testing it over and over again, and you're making all these changes, but it always looks the same. It's like none of the changes are taking effect. And it's because it's failing. It's not coming back with success here. You know, it's not starting the activity. And you can kind of see it's starting the activity now, and we're running get name. So this is not a bad way of kind of looking at the troubleshooting part of it. So I'm going to click on Lab 1. I'm surprised it didn't load actually on its own. It should have loaded. So now I'm going to stick my name in here. Let's see. Yeah, how slow that is. And I'm going to press OK. And I'm going to say hello, Barbara. So that's what it's supposed to do. That is the finished lab, actually. So if I go back, I should be able to change this and say hello, Mary. And press OK. And it should now say hello, Mary, which it does. Very good. So that was a lucky, well, maybe it wasn't lucky. I did it kind of slowly, so it followed through correctly. There's another screen here outside of the console that can show you progress. And it's basically for troubleshooting. In fact, both of these two screens are for troubleshooting the emulator. It's not that it's going to have problems. It's just, this tells you when something is failing. It gives you a hint when that emulator loads. So I don't know what this warning was. Unable to create sensor ports. Okay, whatever. Probably something's not configured correctly, but in any case, this is the working app as you've seen so far, and we could go home, press the home button, go back through and run it again. It should run reliably. Should run again here, and we can run, actually the other things, oh, Mary still shows up. That's interesting because I didn't clear it out. Henry, let's try Henry. Probably spelled Henry wrong, but that's okay. Yep, there you go, Henry. Okay, very good. So I'm going to close this to save some processing memory time here. And so feel free to press on the progress screen if you feel something isn't loading. In fact, sometimes you can see the progress. In fact, this is a good test. So we're pretty much done with Lab 1. So I'm going to close Eclipse, and then I'm going to open up Eclipse again and hit that progress window and show you that how it'll show you the progress of the initialization of the APIs and the services and things that get loaded. So as this loads up here, when the screen comes up, oh, the progress is already, well, here we go. So the progress window is already open. So you can kind of see in the progress window what's happening. And the Android SDK is loading the data for 4.0, emulator, building the workspace. So this is why sometimes when you make a new project and you go over here and you see these, these X's that show up, because it hasn't built the resources yet. And you can, if you see X's over here, you can click on this progress tab that's on the bottom. Normally I moved it up a little bit. And you can see, all of the updating and all of the background stuff that's going on that's supporting the API that's going on there. So you might be wondering, well, how do we get stuff out of Eclipse? And so when you want to deploy, when you want to export an application, there's a way of creating what's called an APK package, application package. And I'm going to upload this file for you so you can see it, this project 1 file. But in the meantime, I'm not going to go through the whole key store thing, but there's a digital signature, a certificate, I should say. There's a certificate that's required to sign, and it goes through an authority called VeriSign, and it's a self-signed certificate that Eclipse handles for you automatically. So you can go through and read the instructions. In fact, if you go and search, just do a web, or go up to the Android developer site and look at, how to compile and sign your Eclipse ADTs, and securing with private keys. You can do that quite easily, or you can just export. So to complete projects, to export them out, to turn them in, you can simply come up here and go File. Let me make this bigger so you can see it. And let's say you want to give this to somebody. You can go File, Export. And then you can export it as an archive file. You can export it as an Android application. So if I said Export Android Application, and I go Next, and I can go, well, select the project to export. Well, let's go Lab 1. That's good. And go Next. And then use existing keystone or create a new one. Let's just use the existing one. It's going to be like a default one. It's going to be given to you. And select the location. Let's just do the desktop. So I'm going to go desktop here. And file name, I'll just call Lab 1. Lab 1. There we go. And do I want to put a password on it? A keystone does not exist, I know. Let's create a new one. Enter keystone password. Test. That's too short. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, that's good. I'm going to go Next. And then enter a key alias. Enter key password. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, they don't match. I know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is required. There's 2, 0, 1. 1. This much of a user is required. Let's see. 25-year is recommended. Okay, do whatever. Next. Destination APX file. Let's put it up here on the desktop. Again, lab1.apx looks good to me. So I just selected the desktop and I put lab1.apx. So the certificate expires in 1 year. Okay, so make sure the certificate is available. I didn't really use a certificate. It was kind of fake, actually. Because I put in bad information. But this is an example of how you would export it out to be used in somebody's Android phone. So I pressed on finish, and it's working away. And on my progress, it says build workspace finished. Okay. So now out on the desktop here, if I make things smaller, oops, where'd it go? Let me make things smaller so I can see my desktop. Here it is up here. So now I have a exported lab APK file, and this is the APK file that you would exchange with somebody else to have them put it on your phone. So, but it's free. It's not like the iPhone where you have to actually buy and pay for it. So you might want to do might want to do some research on setting up, exporting your application, setting up the keystone and getting a real certificate rather than that fake thing I just gave you. And then I just put in some bogus information to show you how to create the APX file. This APX file isn't going to work too well, especially when it has a fake all that fake data in the pad. I don't even remember the password was, but go online. That's one of the good things about the Android development site. In fact, I'm going to just go like this here. I'll load it up into a web browser and search on compile. Let's see. There we go. File and sign with signing your applications. There's your Android development site. And you'll see all of the things to do to create that certificate and sign your application. And you don't really need a certificate. Eclipse will actually create a kind of a dummy one, a default one for you, and they'll all be signed the same way. So this is your reading. You can go through and sign up, reading how to sign your application. And this is essentially an excellent site, by the way, developer.android.com. Excellent site with tutorials, with videos, of references, and all sorts of things. So I will leave you with that. And if you are unsuccessful in creating your project, I'm going to put this on the YouTube site right underneath the video, and it's got all the stuff that you can cut and paste and put into your code, which might make it a little bit easier for you. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned next time when we will move on to bigger and better Android apps. So stay tuned.